Hi everyone, happy Thursday to you all. Today we will actually begin our new unit over the judicial branch in Georgia. If you remember, earlier this week, we began our unit on the executive branch, and their primary function is to enforce the laws that the legislative branch actually creates. And the judicial branch's function actually is to interpret the laws that the legislative branch creates. So we actually have two objectives today. It is a 2-day lesson. So you will have 2 days to complete the assignments. But if I were you, I would go ahead and just get them done Thursday so that you can start your weekend early. So our first objective for today is scholars will be able to analyze the dual purpose of our judicial branch, which is to interpret the laws of Georgia, but also to administer justice in our legal system. The judicial branch, once again, primary responsibility is to interpret the state's laws and to make sure that they are applied properly and uphold the Constitution. The first function of the judicial branch is to interpret laws. It is the role of Georgia's judges to interpret and apply state laws to individual cases and circumstances. One way that the judicial branch fulfills its role is that the Supreme Court may rule that a law passed by the legislative branch is unconstitutional. So for an example, in Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court judges were able to determine that having separate schools based on race was declared unconstitutional. Although when a state law is unclear, the Supreme Court has the final say about the meaning of the law. This is an important check by the judiciary branch on the other two branches of government. So what I really love about our structure of our government is that not one of the branches of government, so whether it's legislative, whether it's executive, whether it's judicial, has more power than another. So that is how they are able to check and balance one another. Another function of the judicial branch is ensuring justice. The judicial branch is charged with ensuring equal protection under the law for all of Georgia's citizens and for enforcing the rule of law. It is responsible for ensuring justice in our legal system by making sure that laws are constitutional, declaring guilt or innocence in a fair manner, and designating punishment that fits the crime. So on the first slide of your presentation, you will read this slide and annotate it. And I'll read it for you. It says, Georgia's judicial branch has dual purposes. Once again, dual means two. The first purpose is it's responsible for interpreting laws of Georgia, but also administering that justice in our legal system. Once again, justice is ensured through many levels of the court system. The Georgia Supreme Court is the highest court in the state, and it holds powers that lower courts do not have. The Georgia Supreme Court is the court responsible for interpreting laws enacted by Georgia's General Assembly. If Georgia's Supreme Court finds a state law has been created that does not support Georgia or the U.S. Constitution, the law is struck down. This is one of, once again, the checks and balances of a judicial branch to ensure fair laws for all Georgia citizens. All courts within the judicial branch have an important role also in administering justice. Once again, that is the second function of the judicial branch. The justice system investigates and prosecutes criminal acts and civil rights violations. The legal system also takes part in preventative efforts to discourage criminal conduct. So what you're going to do on this slide is you're going to click on the yellow seal, and it's going to bring you to this video that you will watch about the judicial branch. You then will go back to your presentation, and then you'll go to the next slide where you do have 6 questions about this video. But if you also look at the top of this slide, you also see a blue here button. You will need to click on that as well, which will end up taking you to this article for you to read, which you will need to read in order to answer some of the questions that are on that slide as well. Most of these questions you will be able to answer from the previous slide, so remember that. We're now going to move on to our second objective for today, which is describing the ways that judges are actually selected in Georgia. Georgia's judges are either elected or appointed. Judges in the Supreme Court of Appeals, judges are in the Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, Superior State, and Probate Courts are elected to their positions at the state, local, and county level. Most magistrate judges are elected, but some are also appointed by local legislators. Juvenile court judges are appointed by Superior Court judges. And just to reiterate, the judicial branch is responsible for interpreting the laws and making sure that they are applied properly and uphold the Constitution in whichever court system that they are in. So the state courts, they make up the judicial branch here in Georgia's government. Georgia has two main kinds of courts. They have trial courts, but they also have appellate courts. Georgia's court system is organized into 7 levels with 2 appellate level courts and 5 trial level courts. So if you look on this slide of your presentation, I'll read it with you, which you will annotate as well. It says the way Georgia judges are selected for service depends on the courts they represent. The state court system is divided in 2 types of courts. Once again, they are trial courts as well as appeal courts, and you see which courts are under the different types of courts. Each court has their own responsibility. So appellate courts, they look over judgments made by lower courts and they handle the appeals. They only hear cases appealed from lower courts rather than trying cases for the first time. So oftentimes when people are going to appellate courts, they've already been to court before and they do not like the verdict that the judge gave them, so they want another chance before another judge in the court system. Appellate courts make sure that trials are fair and do not go against Georgia's Constitution. There are 2 types of appellate courts in Georgia. The first is the Supreme Court and the second is the Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the state and is made up of 7 justices elected to 6-year terms. Georgia Supreme Court may hear cases involving the constitutionality of a law, disputes over elections, death penalty convictions, titles to land, etc. The Court of Appeals is the second highest court in the state, and it is made up of 12 judges who work in panels of 3 to hear cases. So when you go to the Court of Appeals, you won't just have 1 judge sitting in front of you, you will have 3. Trial courts, on the other hand, are a little different from appellate courts. In trial courts, people's actions are measured against the law, so the actions can be judged in one of 2 ways: by a group of citizens called a jury, or simply by a judge. Trial courts hear and try cases for the first time. The 5 trial level courts are superior courts, state courts, juvenile courts, probate courts, and magistrate courts. The superior courts, they can hear almost any civil or criminal case, and they have a judge and a jury. State courts have jurisdiction over misdemeanor violations, and misdemeanor violations are a crime that doesn't sentence someone more than a year in prison, as well as civil cases, and they also have a judge and a jury. Juvenile courts, they have jurisdiction over delinquent children under 17 and deprived children under 18. We'll learn more about delinquent and unruly children next week. They do not have a jury. In fact, juvenile court judges are actually appointed, because if you think about the seriousness of a child who has committed a crime, you do need someone who has a heart for kids. Probate courts, they handle administrative matters such as wills and administration of estates. They may have a jury, so if someone in your family has died and they have left a will and there's a little confusion with the family about who gets what, they will take this particular case to the probate court. Magistrate courts, they handle small civil claims of $15,000 or less, bad checks, arrest warrants, and they do not have a jury. So on this slide, you are going to actually click on this picture. It is going to take you to a Today in Georgia History video. So you will click play and you'll watch the video. You'll then go back to your presentation and go to your next slide. This is a chart that you will complete. And I want you all to be sure that you pay attention to the directions where it says use information from the previous slide. So you will use that information, the Today in Georgia History video, as well as your article that you looked at previously in the presentation. So you are going to be looking at 3 different things to complete this. You will type whether the courts are elected or appointed in these on the dollar lines, as well as how many years the judges are in that particular office. That's what you'll be doing on that particular slide. You also have this copy in your packet that you received before break. So once again, you're going to identify each court's purpose. So are they responsible for interpreting laws of Georgia, or are they responsible for administering justice in our legal system? Some may be both. But the majority of them are either or. Same thing with how these judges, are they either elected or are they appointed? And I told you actually in this video which judges are actually appointed. And then in the last column, you're going to tell me how many years their term is. On this particular part of the handout, all you need to do is go back to this slide here and literally list out what the trial courts are as well as what the appeal courts are. So this is a quick review for you all. So you're going to write your answers on this handout that you received before break. So look back at slide number 4 as a reference. You will have an exit ticket. The exit ticket access code is present in your presentation. Once again, you do have until Friday, to complete this presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to join in on my office hours from 1 to 2 on today. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email, text me, or send me a message on Remind. Thank you. Bye-bye.